Officer Cole Brennan smiled as the cold steel handcuffs clicked tightly around the wrists of the older black man watering his lawn. He thought he had just bagged a neighborhood burglar. He had no idea that the man in the faded college t-shirt was Marcus Harland, the newly appointed director of the FBI. The morning sun had just begun to warm the manicured lawns of Foxhall Crescent, an exclusive ultra-wealthy enclave nestled in the quiet Virginia suburbs just outside of Washington, D.C. It was a neighborhood of sprawling brick colonials, wrought iron gates, and silent tree-lined streets where the average home price hovered around $6 million. Marcus Harlan loved the quiet. He had spent his entire adult life in the deafening, high-stakes chaos of federal law enforcement. He had started as a beat cop in Chicago, earned his law degree at night, joined the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and spent decades hunting down organized crime syndicates, domestic terrorists, and corrupt public officials. After a grueling Senate confirmation hearing, Marcus had been sworn in as the director of the FBI. But on this particular morning, Marcus was not the director. He was simply a homeowner trying to save his prized hydrangeas from root rot. He wore a pair of faded gray sweatpants, scuffed New Balance sneakers, and an old dirt-stained Georgetown University t-shirt. He was kneeling in the rich soil near his mailbox, holding a trowel and humming softly to himself. His federal security detail, usually hovering like shadows, had been ordered to stay back at the estate's perimeter gate. Marcus had explicitly asked for 1 hour of absolute normalcy. 2 streets over, a local county police cruiser was rolling slowly through the neighborhood. Behind the wheel sat Officer Cole Brennan, a veteran of the force with a notoriously short temper and a deeply ingrained habit of deciding who belonged in certain neighborhoods and who did not. Riding shotgun was Officer Nate Soren, a young rookie fresh out of the academy, still idealistic and eager to learn. "Keep your eyes peeled, Soren," Brennan muttered, tapping his fingers on the steering wheel. "Got a report of some stolen Amazon packages in the area. Porch pirates. They usually take the bus in from the city, walk around looking for easy grabs." Soren nodded, scanning the pristine sidewalks. "Looks pretty quiet today, man." "It's never quiet," Brennan scoffed. As the cruiser rounded the corner onto Foxhall Crescent, Brennan's eyes locked onto the figure kneeling in the dirt outside a massive gated colonial estate. It was Marcus. Brennan slammed on his brakes. The cruiser came to an abrupt, screeching halt. "What is it?" Soren asked, startled. "Look at that," Brennan said, pointing a meaty finger toward Marcus, who had just stood up to stretch his aching back. "What's a guy like that doing creeping around the mailbox of the Mitchell estate?" Soren squinted. Gardening? He's got a trowel, Brennan. He's planting something." "Bull," Brennan sneered, throwing the cruiser into park. "He's casing the joint, checking the mail to see if they're out of town. Look at how he's dressed. You think a guy who looks like that lives in a $6 million house? Come on, get out." Marcus heard the heavy thud of the cruiser door slamming shut. He turned, wiping sweat from his forehead with the back of his forearm, and watched as the 2 officers approached. Brennan was walking with an aggressive, wide-stance swagger, his hand resting casually on his utility belt. Soren trailed a few steps behind, looking slightly uncomfortable. "Morning, officers," Marcus said, his voice calm, deeply resonant, and entirely unbothered. "Can I help you?" "Step away from the mailbox, buddy," Brennan ordered, closing the distance until he was standing on the edge of Marcus's grass. Marcus raised an eyebrow, staying exactly where he was. "Excuse me." "You heard me. Put the gardening tool down and step back," Brennan barked, his tone dripping with condescension. "What are you doing here?" Marcus let out a slow, measured breath. Over the course of his career, he had seen every variation of Cole Brennan. He knew the type intimately. The badge was a shield for their prejudices, a weapon to enforce their personal worldview. "I am tending to my garden," Marcus said evenly. He deliberately placed the trowel on the ground. "Is there a problem?" "Yeah, there's a problem," Brennan said, stepping onto the grass and invading Marcus's personal space. "We've had some thefts in this neighborhood, packages walking off porches, and now I see you hanging around a property that clearly isn't yours, digging through the mail." Marcus's posture straightened. Even in sweatpants, he carried an imposing, authoritative presence, a posture honed by decades of interrogating hardened criminals and briefing presidents. "I assure you, officer, I am not digging through the mail, and this property is, in fact, mine." Brennan let out a harsh, mocking laugh. "Yours? Okay, let's see some ID then." "My wallet is inside the house," Marcus replied, his voice dropping an octave and slipping into the commanding tone he used in the Hoover building. "I'd be happy to go inside and retrieve it for you." "You aren't going anywhere," Brennan snapped, stepping forward and grabbing Marcus's forearm. "You're going to stand right here while I run your name." "What is it?" Marcus looked down at the officer's hand gripping his arm. The legal and procedural violations were stacking up rapidly. "Officer," Marcus said softly, dangerously, "I strongly suggest you remove your hand from my person. You have no reasonable, articulable suspicion to detain me, let alone put hands on me on my own property. Brennan's face flushed red. He hated when suspects used legal jargon. It challenged his authority. Oh, we got a roadside lawyer here. Soren, grab his other arm. He's resisting. I'm not resisting, Marcus stated, standing perfectly still. Soren hesitated. Brennan, maybe we should just let him get his wallet. I said grab his arm, rookie, Brennan roared. Before Soren could move, Brennan unclipped his handcuffs, violently twisted Marcus's right arm behind his back, and shoved the older man against the brick pillar of the mailbox. The metal cuffs ratcheted tightly around Marcus's wrists, biting into his skin. Marcus did not struggle. He did not yell. He simply let his cheek rest against the warm brick of his own driveway pillar. You're making a mistake, Marcus said, his voice eerily calm. Shut up, Brennan hissed, patting Marcus down aggressively. Finding no weapons and no wallet, he shoved Marcus toward the cruiser. You're going downtown for loitering, prowling, and resisting arrest. Let's see how smart you sound in a holding cell. As Brennan forced the director of the FBI into the cramped plastic back seat of the police cruiser, Mrs. Eleanor Whitmore, Marcus's wealthy elderly neighbor, peeked through her silk curtains. She gasped and immediately reached for her telephone. The drive to the 4th District County Precinct was suffocatingly tense. The heavy plexiglass divider separated the front of the cruiser from the back, but the atmosphere was thick enough to choke on. In the driver's seat, Brennan was practically vibrating with misplaced triumph. He drove with one hand on the wheel, bragging to his silent partner. See, Soren, that's proactive policing. You see something out of place, you act on it. You don't ask for permission, you take control of the streets. Guy thought he could fast-talk me with all that articulable suspicion garbage. Soren sat rigid in the passenger seat, staring straight ahead. Every few seconds, his eyes darted to the rearview mirror. What unsettled Soren was not just the arrest itself, which he already suspected was a massive civil rights violation, but the man in the back seat. Suspects in the back of a squad car usually behaved in one of three ways. They were furious and screaming. They were terrified and crying, or they were intoxicated and rambling. The man in the back seat was doing none of those things. Marcus Harlan sat perfectly upright, his hands cuffed behind his back, his expression entirely unreadable. He was not looking out the window. He was staring directly at the back of Brennan's head. It was the cold, calculating stare of a predator observing a particularly clueless prey. Hey, Soren finally spoke up, turning slightly to look through the grate. Look, sir, if you just tell us your name, we can clear this up at the station. Marcus shifted his gaze to the young rookie. He saw the hesitation in the kid's eyes. My name, Marcus said quietly, is going to be the least of your partner's problems. Brennan barked a laugh. Tough guy. I love it when they act tough. We'll see how tough you are when you're sitting in booking. The cruiser pulled into the heavily fortified parking lot of the 4th District Precinct. Brennan hauled Marcus out of the back seat, gripping him roughly by the bicep, and marched him through the heavy double doors into the chaotic booking area. The precinct was loud, smelling of stale coffee, sweat, and floor wax. Phones were ringing, officers were yelling over one another, and a few minor offenders were handcuffed to the metal benches along the wall. Behind the elevated booking desk sat Desk Sergeant Elias Crow, a seasoned veteran who had little patience for nonsense. He did not even look up from his paperwork as Brennan paraded Marcus to the desk. Got a live one for you, Elias, Brennan announced proudly, shoving Marcus forward so his chest bumped against the edge of the high desk. Prowling, failure to identify, and resisting caught him casing the Mitchell estate over on Foxhall. Sergeant Crow sighed and slowly looked up. He took one look at Marcus, the dignified posture, the calm demeanor, the distinct lack of criminal panic, and frowned. He doesn't look like a prowler, Brennan. He looks like a guy who was doing yard work. He refused to ID, Brennan insisted, crossing his arms. Marcus cleared his throat. Sergeant, he said, projecting his voice just enough to cut through the din of the room. Before this officer processes any paperwork that will ruin his career and severely impact this department, I am legally entitled to a phone call. I would like my cell phone, which your officer unlawfully removed from my pocket. Brennan rolled his eyes. He wants to call his public defender. Go ahead. Let him use the precinct line. No, Marcus said firmly. I will use my own secure device now. There was something in Marcus's tone that made Sergeant Crow pause. It was the undeniable voice of a commander. Crow looked at Brennan. Give him his phone, Cole. Are you kidding me? Brennan scoffed. He's a suspect. Give him the damn phone, Crow growled. Let him call his lawyer. It saves us the headache. Grumbling, Brennan fished Marcus's sleek government-issued smartphone out of an evidence bag and slammed it onto the desk. He unlocked one of Marcus's cuffs, leaving his left hand attached to the booking rail so he could dial. Marcus picked up the phone. He did not dial a lawyer. He pressed a single speed dial button. The call connected on the first ring. Director, a sharp, professional voice answered. It was Special Agent Quinn Ashford, the head of Marcus's protective detail. Quinn, Marcus said, his voice eerily calm, I have encountered a situation. At the perimeter of Marcus's estate, sitting inside a black armored Chevrolet Suburban, Agent Ashford sat up instantly. Sir, is there a threat? I have been detained by a local patrol officer, Marcus continued, ignoring Brennan, who was leaning against the desk smirking. I am currently at the 4th District County Precinct. Ashford's blood ran cold. You were arrested? Sir, we... Stand down on a tactical breach, Quinn, Marcus ordered smoothly, but I want you to bring the detail to the station. Furthermore, I want you to patch in Deputy Director Felix Drayton. Tell him to scramble a Civil Rights Division response team from the Washington field office. Tell them the director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation is currently handcuffed to a booking desk. Brennan, who was close enough to hear Marcus's side of the conversation, burst out laughing. Director of the FBI, are you out of your mind? Elias, this guy is a total nut job. Put him in psych. But Sergeant Crow was not laughing. While Marcus had been speaking, Crow had taken Marcus's right index finger and pressed it onto the digital biometric scanner on the desk to start the booking process. The computer system beeped. It did not just pull up a local rap sheet. The screen suddenly flashed solid red. A high-level warning banner appeared. A system override connected directly to the National Crime Information Center and the federal database. Clearance. Top secret/SCI. Agency. Federal Bureau of Investigation. Title. Director. Name. Harlan Marcus. Crow's face drained of all color. The ruddy complexion of the veteran desk sergeant turned the color of wet ash. His eyes darted from the glaring red screen to the man standing calmly in front of him. Brennan, Crow whispered, his voice trembling so violently it cracked. What? Brennan asked, pouring himself a cup of coffee. Has he got warrants? I knew it. Brennan, Crow said again, standing up slowly, his hands shaking as he reached for the keys to the handcuffs. You didn't arrest a prowler? Crow swallowed hard, looking Marcus dead in the eyes as absolute terror set in. You arrested the director of the FBI. The silence that fell over the booking room was absolute. The ringing phones seemed to fade into the background. The chaotic shuffling of officers and suspects came to a dead halt. Everyone was staring at the glaring red screen of the biometric scanner and then at the older black man handcuffed to the rail. Officer Cole Brennan let out a nervous, dismissive chuckle. His brain violently rejected the information in front of him. Elias, come on, the machine is glitching, or he stole someone's identity. You think the director of the FBI is wearing dirty sweatpants on Foxhall Crescent? Sergeant Crow did not answer. His hands were shaking so violently that he dropped his key ring twice before finally fitting the small silver key into the locking mechanism on Marcus's wrist. The heavy metal cuffs clicked and swung open. Director Harlan, Crow stammered, his voice completely devoid of its usual gruff authority. Sir, I apologize. I had no idea. Marcus rubbed his wrist slowly, feeling the deep red indentations left by the tightened steel. He did not yell. He did not gloat. His demeanor remained as cold and impenetrable as a glacier. Your ignorance of my identity, Sergeant, is not the issue. The issue is your officer's flagrant violation of the Fourth Amendment. I was detained without reasonable suspicion, assaulted, and arrested without probable cause. How was casing a house? Brennan shouted, though his voice had lost its confident swagger and been replaced by a shrill, desperate panic. I saw him! You saw a black man in a wealthy neighborhood, Marcus corrected, turning his piercing gaze onto Brennan. And you constructed a crime to justify your prejudice. Before Brennan could formulate another defense, a low, rhythmic vibration began to shake the reinforced glass windows of the precinct. It sounded like distant thunder, but it was growing louder by the second. Rookie officer Nate Soren, who had been standing silently near the door, turned to look out into the parking lot. His jaw dropped. Sergeant, Brennan, you need to see this. Tearing into the precinct's front lot was a motorcade of 6 pitch-black armored Chevrolet Suburbans. They did not park in the designated visitor spots. They drove directly over the curbs, blockading the precinct's exits and forming a tactical perimeter around the front entrance. The flashing red and blue lights embedded in their grills cast frantic, chaotic shadows through the precinct windows. What is happening? Brennan whispered, taking a step back. The heavy double doors of the precinct did not just open, they were violently shoved apart. A wave of federal power flooded into the local station. A dozen men and women in dark suits and heavy tactical vests, bearing the bold yellow letters FBI, stormed the lobby. They moved with military precision, instantly securing the exits, the front desk, and the holding cells. Local officers instinctively raised their hands, stepping back from the overwhelming display of federal force. Leading the charge was Special Agent Quinn Ashford. His eyes swept the room like a thermal scanner until they locked onto Marcus rubbing his wrist by the booking desk. Ashford's face hardened into a mask of pure, unadulterated fury. Secure the room, Ashford barked. Nobody makes a call, nobody touches a computer, and nobody leaves. 2 heavily Armed agents instantly flanked Sergeant Crow, who raised his hands in immediate surrender. Two more stepped in front of Soren, who looked like he was ready to faint. Ashford marched directly up to Marcus. Director, are you injured? I'm fine, Quinn, Marcus replied smoothly, adjusting his Georgetown t-shirt. Just a minor inconvenience. Sir, Deputy Director Drayton is on his way with the Civil Rights Division response team, Ashford reported, his hand resting on his holstered weapon as he glared at Brennan. Identify the officer who put hands on you. Marcus did not need to point. Brennan was pressed against the back wall, his face the color of spoiled milk, hyperventilating. The arrogance that had fueled him on the drive over had completely evaporated, replaced by the sheer, crushing reality that he had just arrested the most powerful law enforcement officer in the country. Who is in charge of this precinct? Marcus demanded, his voice finally echoing with the booming authority of his office. The door to the back offices flew open, and Captain Grant Holloway practically fell into the hallway. He was a portly man in a rumpled white shirt, sweating profusely. He had seen the Suburbans out his window and was trying to pull his uniform jacket on as he ran. I'm Captain Holloway, he shouted, rushing forward, only to be stopped by the stiff arm of a federal agent. Holloway looked at the tactical agents, then at Marcus, and he visibly swallowed hard. Director Harlan, sir, this is a monumental misunderstanding. My men, they make mistakes, but I assure you... Stop talking, Captain, Marcus commanded. The room fell dead silent. There is no misunderstanding here. A misunderstanding is a clerical error. What happened to me today was a targeted deprivation of civil rights under color of law. And if your officer felt emboldened enough to do it to me in broad daylight, in my own front yard, it means he has done it to others who did not have the power to stop him. Marcus took a step toward Brennan. The officer shrank back, trembling. You thought you were the predator today, Officer Brennan, Marcus said softly, dangerously. You thought you found easy prey, but you walked into a trap you didn't even know existed. The precinct had been completely paralyzed. Federal agents had essentially occupied the 4th District. Local cops stood awkwardly in the corners, watching as FBI technicians began mirroring the station's dispatch computers and securing evidence lockers. The twist was something Brennan never could have seen coming. Marcus Harlan was not just reacting to a bad arrest. The Department of Justice had quietly flagged the 4th District for a disproportionate amount of excessive force complaints and unconstitutional stops targeting minorities. Marcus had been scheduled to authorize a preliminary federal probe into the precinct. Brennan had not just arrested the FBI director. He had hand-delivered the Bureau the exact probable cause they needed to rip the precinct apart. The heavy glass doors swung open again, and Deputy Director Felix Drayton walked in. He was a tall, sharp-featured man with a briefcase and a team of federal prosecutors trailing behind him. Marcus, Drayton said, handing a thick stack of warrants to Agent Ashford. We got the federal magistrate to sign off in record time. We have immediate authorization to seize all body camera footage, dash cam recordings, and internal affairs files for an extended period for this precinct. Captain Holloway looked like he was going to be sick. Director, you can't just seize our entire department's records over one bad stop. I absolutely can, and I just did, Marcus said, taking a seat in the desk chair Crow had vacated. He looked entirely at ease, commanding the room in sweatpants and sneakers. Captain, I suggest you disarm Officer Brennan immediately. Holloway did not hesitate. He turned to the trembling officer. Brennan, badge and gun, now. Captain, please, Brennan begged, tears welling in his eyes. His voice was a pathetic whine. I was just doing my job. He looks suspicious. You can't let them do this to me. You did this to yourself, Cole, Holloway growled, stepping forward and stripping the Glock from Brennan's holster, then ripping the silver shield from his chest. You're a disgrace, Officer Brennan, Deputy Director Drayton stated, stepping forward with a pair of FBI handcuffs. You are being placed under federal arrest for the violation of 18 U.S.C. Section 242, deprivation of rights under color of law. You have the right to remain silent, which I highly recommend you utilize. Brennan broke down sobbing as the federal agents spun him around. The sound of the handcuffs ratcheting closed was the exact same sound Marcus had heard outside his home. Only this time, the justice was absolute. As Brennan was marched out of the precinct, paraded past his stunned colleagues, and shoved into the back of a black FBI Suburban, Marcus turned his attention to the young rookie, Soren. Soren stiffened, expecting to be arrested next. He had been complicit. He had watched it happen. Marcus walked slowly over to the young man. Officer Soren, isn't it? Yes, sir, Soren whispered, staring at his boots. You knew it was wrong, Marcus said, his tone shifting from commanding to instructive. I saw it in your eyes in the cruiser. You knew he was out of line, but you stayed silent because he was your senior officer. I should have stopped him, sir. I'm sorry. Apologies don't protect civil liberties, son, Marcus said firmly. Courage does. The badge you wear is a heavy burden. It demands that you police your own with the same intensity you police the streets. If you ever stand by and watch a fellow officer abuse their power again, I will personally ensure you share a cell with Brennan. Do you understand me? Yes, Director, crystal clear. Marcus nodded, satisfied. He turned back to the room, looking at the stunned faces of the local police force, the terrified captain, and the army of federal agents standing at the ready. Agent Ashford, Marcus said, rolling his sleeves down. Yes, Director. Let's go home. I need to finish planting my hydrangeas. Marcus walked out of the precinct, the heavy doors held open by federal agents. He left behind a shattered local police station, a corrupt officer facing federal prison, and a legacy that would echo through the halls of law enforcement for decades. The predator had become the prey, and justice had been served, swift and uncompromising. What a story of ultimate, instantaneous karma. Officer Brennan thought he could use his badge as a weapon to bully an innocent man, only to find out he had just handcuffed the most powerful law enforcement officer in the nation. It goes to show that arrogance and prejudice will always catch up to you, sometimes in the most spectacular way possible. If you love this dramatic twist of fate and want to hear more incredible storytelling, smash that like button, share this video with your friends, and don't forget to subscribe for more. Let us know in the comments what you think Brennan's face looked like when that computer screen turned red. Thank you for watching.